Hi, my friend, and welcome to the Good Girl Syndrome Show. My name is Julie Vander Meulen, in case you do not know me, or Julie Vander Meulen. If you happen to be in an Anglophone country, and that's how you pronounce my name. And today we are going to do an episode on alignment, what it means to be aligned, and how to recognize it. And it was inspired by the Wednesday episode that I just did with Clémence, who was asking me very, very intelligent questions around, whether in the situations that she was facing, if she was actually being aligned in like respecting her needs, putting her needs first, or was she actually avoiding, discomfort by always putting her needs first, right? So if you're interested in that topic, go check out the episode from Wednesday. That would be episode number 21, if I'm not mistaken. So go check that out if that's what you're interested in. Today, what I'm going to talk about is my own experience with alignment, how it came to me, and the different realizations that I've had through time, and like how what alignment meant has changed for me, like in practice, right? Like how I was perceiving it at different phases of my life and where I am now, right? Who knows where I'm going to be tomorrow, right? But right now, I'm in a specific phase and I'm going to tell you all about that. Before I start, though, my friend, if you want to show me some love, if you love the Good Girl Syndrome show, if you just want to encourage me to keep going with whatever it is that I'm doing that you like, please encourage me. Either put a thumbs up on this video, comment below, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, share it with someone else, go check out the resources below. I have tons of free resources, a newsletter on Sunday that is free, a good girl syndrome, okay, a good girl syndrome quiz that is free, and all sorts of paid resources if you're interested in that as well. Now, let's begin. So I wrote a few things down because I was trying to understand like what types of phases I've been through since I've been like since alignment, the word alignment was in my vocabulary. And so perhaps I can start with the beginning of me understanding what alignment means. So alignment didn't come into my life until I was perhaps 20. I'm 34 now, so perhaps when I was 28, something like that. When I was trying to, I had just moved out of my home. I had broken up with my ex-boyfriend that I had been with for 9 years, almost 9 years. I had just started a new job and career in academia. I was at the very beginning stage of my PhD. I was doing a PhD in political science, in case you do not know. Um, and I had a lot of time on my hands. So I was working a lot of hours per day. But because before I was part of a family, right? And I was a very active member of that family. And I also had a boyfriend. All of a sudden, I had way more time because I was not living with my family and because I didn't have a boyfriend anymore. And so I started, you know, noticing patterns in myself that I didn't realize were my fault. In the sense that I'm not, perhaps my fault is not the right word, but I when I was living with my family and when I was with my ex, I attributed a lot of the negative things that were going on inside of me. I thought that they were the cause of it, right? Like that's how I was perceiving the world back then. Very little self-awareness back then. That's how you learn, that's how you grow. And so I was in a phase where I was actually interested in understanding myself better and in seeing like what's going on with me. Like why am I so sad when I don't see any reason to be sad right now? Or why am I so scared? Or why am I so angry? Or why, like all these different things. So I went to therapy, I started coaching, I started going to seminars, I read and read and read and read. If you know anything about me, you know that I'm a bit of a nerd. So I was reading and reading and reading and reading and, reflecting and pondering and meditating on things and so on and so forth. So that's where the word alignment starts to show up because I started becoming, I was always interested in philosophy. Philosophy has been part of a lot of the research that I had done for my PhD, but before that too, I have done a few master's degrees, and I was always flirting with philosophy. So reading philosophical books was something that I absolutely adore. I still do today. And I discovered that there was a branch of philosophical books that were flirting, if I can say the word, with spirituality. So I was not into spirituality at the time, although I had just met a new friend about a year before, a Brazilian friend who was very religious, a Christian. And she taught me many beautiful things about her way of seeing the world that was different from how I grew up and what I believed in at the time. And so, what was interesting was that then I started reading about all those different types of life books, or like life types of philosophy, and or spiritual books, right? About the meaning of life, how life is could be working for you, all these different things, feel good types of, sensations. And inside of that, psychological books as well. And inside of that, a word kept coming up, which was the word alignment, right? I want to feel aligned. I also met another beautiful friend, a very spiritual being, a psychologist who was always talking about needs and emotions and alignment and stuff like that. So I was very blessed during that period that I was in a sort of cocoon, that was absolutely perfect for me to learn these types of things. And so now on to how I actually understood alignment to begin with. So let me take my notes here. So, oh yeah. So my first phase of alignment is when I was doing all of that. The first phase was it's actually the two first phases happen in parallel with, like, ebbs and flows between one and the other. So I'm gonna simplify it and just say that they were, pretend that they were two different phases, but just so you know, I was going in and out of each. So the first phase was, I thought that alignment was saying yes to life, right? That being aligned meant just not resisting life. And I think that there's some truth to it, because before that, I had spent most of my life being chronically depressed, right? Going in and out of that, but mostly in phases of depression, and having a quite gloomy attitude towards life and perception of life, right? I didn't see the meaning to it most of the time, like a very, very gloomy, dark type of inner world that I used to have. And in that, I realized after a little bit of therapy that what I was doing in actuality was that I was resisting life. Like, I'm not going to go into the details of what that looked like, but my inner world, everything inside of me was always saying no. No to this, no to that, no because I'm scared, no because, I'm not capable, no because I believe that people are bad, no because, I don't think that any good comes out of the world. Like, my beliefs about the world, right, were shaping what types of actions I was taking, and the actions were always no's, right? I was always going for safety and I never wanted to do anything. And so I came to the realization that if I took all of that, right, in a meta way, if I looked at all of that together, what that meant basically was that I was always resisting life. I was always saying no. Whatever came up to my life, I was always saying no. It so happened that I met another friend, a man, who was very, very enthusiastic about life, and I was very critical about life. And so we talked together, and he told me about he loved series and shows, and he loved Shonda Rhimes. And it so happened that at the same time, I saw that she had published a book called Yes, Year of Yes, I think. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. I haven't read it in years, but I absolutely loved that. It's not about alignment, but it's about not resisting life and saying yes to yes to whatever comes your way, right? So she took a whole year where she was saying yes to things, and that's what I did too. So I decided that I was going to do the opposite of what I was doing, which is, since I was always saying no, for 1 year, I would always say yes, right? And so alignment to me, it was exhilarating. It was exhilarating because for the first time in my life, for a sustained period of time, it felt like everything was possible. And I felt aligned with my own life. I felt aligned with what was possible. I felt aligned with many, many people because I had different way to me. I was very open. I was very warm. Like, I discovered parts of myself that I already knew, right? But they were coming out very rarely, right? And here it was becoming my dominant energy, right? So for me, the first phase of alignment looked something like a year of yes. It was saying yes to life. It was opening myself up. It was this type of, this type of gesture. If I can represent it with a gesture, it was something like that, like saying absolutely yes. And, I agree and I receive everything that you want to give me, life, please give it to me and I will take it. I take this as a gift. So that was phase one. Unfortunately, what I didn't anticipate because I didn't know any better was two things. One, I was exhausted because I was saying yes to everything. And so I was pouring my energy. Like in the beginning, it was exhilarating. After some time, it was still in some ways very exciting. And it was for sure very expanding as an experience. But it was also exhausting, right? Number one, because then I was never asking myself, do I want to do this? Do I have the energy for it? None of that existed in my vocabulary, in my world back then. And the second thing is, as a result of that, I didn't have any filters. So I was saying yes to everything, every single thing that came into my world. Doesn't matter if now I would say if it was aligned or not, right? So basically, I did not have a filter for what do I like? What do I not like? Do I have a vision for my life? Like, does this fit the vision that I have for my life? Does it fit who I think I am or who I want to be? Like, none of these questions, were part of my inner world back then. So, that's where I was. And so comes in phase number two, right? Remember, if in your life it doesn't look like that, you have a version of that, but it looks way more complex, that's normal. It's because I'm simplifying. Mine is two, it's just I'm simplifying it here into phases just to be able to better, explain this to you. By the way, I haven't said it earlier because I forgot, but I have a little friend today who's doing this session with me. I don't know if he's going to appear or not, but right here, like 2 centimeters below the camera, I have my little dog Leo who's doing this episode with me. So if you happen to see a little, a little head pop up, that's just Leo. Should have introduced him, but now he's sleeping. So the second phase was about then I started thinking, so if alignment is not saying yes to everything, like I kept the opening up to life, right? But I realized, no, I think alignment is going inward, like being open, but also going inward and slowing down. So I had a whole phase. I'm not going to call it mystical because it's not exactly that, but very spiritual and very like reflective, contemplative, this type of phase. I was more of a Zen type of person. So still doing my PhD at the time, right? But in my free time, that's what I was doing. I was spending most of my time on my own. I was asking myself many, many questions, reading many books, going to seminars. Like I had so many courses that I took. Like I was doing meditations. Like I was doing all these types of things that I had never and even encountered before. Like I didn't know that world before. I was reading spiritual texts, like deep things, right? I was learning from different um, types of religious beliefs. I was learning, not necessarily because I was trying to find something that suits me, but because I thought the topic of like understanding the meaning of life fascinating. And so I was just looking at all these different things and just I was being like a sponge, right? And at the same time, I had created this life where it was beautiful because I was in like input mode, right? Like I was receiving everything. So before, if you think about it, I was in output mode. I had discovered what it was like to give of myself, like constantly and saying yes and being like, super appreciative of all these things. And now I was more in a phase where I was taking everything into my heart, right? And then the phase was absolutely beautiful. It was transformative as well. The first one was for sure absolutely transformative. It put me like yeah. It was very lucky that this happened so early in my academic career because that gave me many different opportunities in the coming years that came from that mindset shift and that understanding of life, right? Because I was someone who was then known as saying yes to things and figuring things out even when she didn't have all the solutions, something that I have kept to this day, right? I'm very much this person. And so then phase number two, I go more inward, I'm more in the reflective mode, and I rediscover parts of myself again, right? That I had not been um, you know, in contact with for a long, long time. Like since I was little, I was very much an observant type of child, right? I was more someone who was contemplative, who was, I was always in French, we say dans la lune, like on the moon, right? Meaning, I look like I'm someone who's easily distracted. When in fact, to me, right, to the outside world, I'm sure that I am distracted. To myself, I feel hyper focused when I'm in this. Like I'm thinking deeply about things, right? And so it's like I zoom out from the world and I'm like in my own space and I feel connected to everything in a different way. I don't know how to explain that better than that. So, for example, I will go in nature and I can feel and see all the things. Perhaps I will not be listening as much to the people when they're talking to me, but me myself, I feel very, very connected to everything, right? And so, that was that phase. And it was absolutely beautiful because I discovered myself in ways I would not have because I did a lot of self work. I did a lot of questioning. I did a lot of finding answers to questions that I had never asked myself. Who am I? Who have I been? Who do I want to be? What do I want? What do I need? If I could be anything, what would I be? If I were, what are my fears, right? What am I scared of? What makes me sad in the world? What can't I live without? What do I want? And then starting envisioning a future for myself. And I think that's how I came into phase number three, which was that at some point in this beautiful, beautiful phase, I adored being in that state, like adored it. And at the same time, I realized that, the issue with this phase, when I'm just this, is that I do not wish to be a monk, at least not in this phase of my life, right? I have many, many things that I would still like to accomplish in the world, and I want to contribute in many different ways. And being a monk who's always in reflection mode was not who I wanted to be. Like, I love that there's this part of myself, and I think I bring it everywhere that I go, right? I have never left it since. Perhaps you can see some of that when I'm talking to you here. But I do not want to be a monk, right? This is not what I want to be. And so I realized that the issue with always being inward is that life was passing me by, and some of the things that I wanted were outside in the world, right? And so the advantage of the first phase was that I was taking a lot of action and I was saying a lot of yes, while the second phase was saying a lot of yes to me, but it was saying a lot of no's to the rest of the world, just because I was in my own home, right? In my own four walls, with a lot of access to the world through books and conferences and different things, right? But not so much in terms of action. Um, and so that's when I thought, okay, so alignment isn't just saying yes, right? Or being open to the world. That was lesson number one. It's not just looking inward and seeing, who I really am, what I really want, like being deeply connected with myself and with the world as in, a higher power, if you believe in one, in life, in a meta way, right? In with nature, with like human beings, but in a more abstract way, right? Not necessarily in a conversation, but more like humanity, right? In a philosophical way. And I was thinking there must be something else, like who I want to be. And that's in a reflection in phase number two of my reflections, plus phase number one, where I realized how good I was and how much I love being in so much action and I love being the driver of these things. I realized that I wanted to have my own business, that what I actually always wanted to be was a businesswoman. I just was afraid of it. I was afraid of different things that I had seen that I was afraid to replicate. And I was afraid that perhaps, like, I had many fears, around money, around, being my own boss, especially around how would other people perceive me, especially in academia. How would I leave academia? Like all these different things that nowadays don't matter at all to me. But back then they were super, super important to me. Other people's perceptions and approval and, praise was up there, right? It's how I had made most of my decisions in my whole life. So entered phase number three, which I will call my startup slash entrepreneurship type of phase. Um, so after academia, actually at the same time, I was finishing my contract in my university. So I stopped my PhD after 5 years, right? And I had negotiated the end of my contract so that I could still work. So after 4 years, I asked to stop. And I asked if I could still continue for another year of doing mainly some of the, how can I call that? I was doing some leadership work inside of academia. And I was managing, let's say, a project, let's call it like that, perhaps it's more accurate. And I was also teaching. So I asked to stop my research so that I could focus on what I actually wanted to do next, right? Um, and but I would still deliver some of the things that I was doing before. And so in the process of that, I found a job in a startup in the US. So I was a freelancer, an editor. And we part of that was I was the first person hired for that to start a platform, right? And so build a whole team, and so that we would create a big platform that would be, on a sort of political education type of platform for American citizens, to give a sort of bipartisan take on different issues. Then it went into the whole world and so on, and the project changed in itself. But that's what I was hired for. So for the first time in my life, I was in a startup environment, which I had never been in, right? Academia is very different from a startup environment. I would say that in my experience, at least, perhaps it's not true everywhere, but in my experience, academia is very slow. Academia thinks it's going fast and that it's like overbooked with so much work and all of that. But I think there is a lot of work, but there is a lot of work of like thinking time. And there is no there's a lot of stuckness in that in academia that I don't think they perceive, or that I perceived myself because I was part of that, right? Of the stuckness and the slow pace. In a startup environment, it's the complete opposite. Like nothing is mature when you release it into the world, right? You do something, it has to be fast. So it was a very fast-paced environment that taught me many beautiful things. It taught me that speed mattered in life and that there were moments for things that like there are specific windows in life that only happen at this moment, and so you have to seize the opportunity and run with it, and it's going to be imperfect, right? And that's what you would expect, and you go all in on this thing and you fail. Like most of the times, you do something, you absolutely fail, but that doesn't matter because you learned in the process, right? So very different mindset from what I knew from academia, but also in my own life. Like the other two experiences were different from there. Here I had to be more, even more strategic, right? I had to be a mix of logical and very courageous and brave in the moment to like say yes, and also in what I would say no to, and also fail all the time, this fast failing type of mentality. And so to me, alignment in that um, became not just about, saying yes to life, saying yes to the world. It wasn't just about like mindlessly saying yes to whatever, although I kept the openness. It wasn't just going inward and knowing what I wanted and what I needed, but being, you know, separate from the world in a real way, in an everyday way. Then alignment in that phase of my life became about moving forward. It became about speed. It became about imperfection, right? About being okay with imperfection. And it became like life became the meaning of life, or like how I would conduct my life would be to move forward. It doesn't matter where you're landing, right? You need to have a direction, right, of what you want and where you want to go, but you have to move forward. If you're just staying in your home, it won't work. If you're not strategic about what you say yes to, it won't work either. So you have to be open, you have to be contemplative, you have to know very deeply what you want, but you also have to move forward and you have to move fast, right? So that was kind of the mindset that I was in. So very efficient, very much about showing up, like all these different things that were very important in that environment and very important in my life and still to this day. Like how I'm conducting all of this, right? You can probably see that there's progress in how I've created. If you've been here since the very beginning, thank you. Thank you for being there with me from the very beginning. If you were there, you will see that in the beginning, I don't have a good background. I don't know how to speak in the microphone. I don't know, like there's so much I don't know. And there's still so much I don't know now, right? Now I know how to make a thumbnail. Now I know how to make, little shorts, little shorts of my videos that I post on YouTube and, reels on Instagram, like all those things that I'm learning in the moment, right? I would not be taking this route if it was not for me going into this startup environment and starting my own business and having this whole, sort of business mindset and background, right? So very grateful for it. And at the same time, I realized that going fast and looking for efficiency everywhere, right? Even when I am asking myself what I want and need, right? Phase number two. And even when I have an openness to the world, it's not always enough. It's not always enough because going fast all the time and being efficient all the time doesn't represent how life actually works. Because sometimes there's phases where you need to be able to slow down and you need to be able to really listen to yourself, or life doesn't agree with your plans. So you may think, I had so many goals, right, that I wanted to have, and I would go and jump into all of them at the same time, right? Goals that were very aligned, right? They were aligned with what I wanted in a moment, right? However, life also had its plans, right? My grandma gets sick, like all these different things started happening that I was like, oh, like, how can I be and do these four different things that seem to work against one another, right? And so I realized that I was forcing. I thought that it was aligned, but I actually realized that it wasn't integrated. I had like four different visions for my life that were conflicting with one another, right? I couldn't be an amazing PhD student if I also, and be all in that, like all the other students that I had, because I started a second PhD and I stopped after 3 months. I couldn't do that at the same time that I was just launching my business, right? And I was going all in on that, right? And I couldn't do that, right? And my business required me to not be like at that phase, I wasn't making much money. And so if I'm not making much money, how am I paying this very expensive PhD? Right. And if I'm super focused on these two things, right? One, my learning experience, and the second thing is also learning experience, but building a business, then how do I also at the same time take care of my grandma who is having a very, very tough time? And I think she's going to pass away. And so I'm seeing all these different things. There were other things in my life as well, but these were the three big things. And I'm like, they're in contradiction with one another. Like each one of them is important to me. And I'm so stressed out and completely misaligned because I don't know what to prioritize. And so that's where alignment changed. And I think this is the phase that I'm in right now, phase number 4. Um, Alignment to me meant these three things. So the three phases are integrated inside of me, right? So it's still about saying yes to life and being open to opportunities, right? It's still about going inward and knowing what I want and what I need and all of that. And it's also about speed and, seeing what opportunities are there in life and saying yes to these things as well, right? And like moving fast and moving forward, like the principle of always moving forward is ingrained in me at this stage. Like that's what I want every single day. Doesn't matter how, but I need to be moving forward with my life and in a direction of what I want. And I would say that in the direction of what I want is the biggest thing of my alignment in phase 4. So I would say phase 4 to me is alignment is integration of everything that I want, like being very clear on what life do I want. It's not I want a PhD or I want a business or I want my grandma to be healthy and I want to be there for her. It's not about that. It's about the bigger thing. The big meta thing is who do I want to be? Who am I versus who do I want to be, right? And to be who I want to be, like who I want to be, right, has a specific way of life. How does she handle her things? How does she live her life, right? And then alignment for me becomes, if this is the goal, right? If this is the direction then that I'm going toward, being aligned is the connection between how aligned, how much in line am I with this goal that I have, with this person that I want to become? How does it feel? Do I feel like I'm moving forward towards that? Does it feel good, right? Am I saying yes to this vision every single day? Do you see, I'm always going back to the 3 phases, right? But I have a clear direction, right? And it feels really good. Not every single moment of every day, right? And what it also gave me compared to phase 3, where I was really stressed out because my priority was to always be fast and efficient and like move forward was the only thing. It's also in this integration of who I want to be. It's also that I want to be a full human being who experiences life fully and to be fully alive. And to do that means being okay and loving the ebbs and flows of life, the ebbs and flows of what happens in the world, the ebbs and flows of other people that I love in my life and what's happening with them, and this interfering with my own life, and the ebbs and flows of myself, of my energy, of how convinced I am about who I want to become, the breakdowns of being like, actually, I think who I want to become has changed a little, and I need to go back and figure that out before I continue to do things. The ebbs and flows can also be phases of intense work, right? Intense work or intense motivation, intense excitement, and some phases where it doesn't feel all that great, right? But still continuing to go forward. So I would say that perhaps to conclude, alignment to me today means all of these different things. It means being able to feel good. I think alignment means feeling good. To feel good overall, 80, 90% of the time. I aim for more, but let's go with 80, 90% of the time is a good score, I think. And that 80, 90% of the time, what I'm doing and how I'm living my life corresponds to who I want to be, right? I feel like being aligned means being in line with what I want, being in line with who I want to become, right? Like there's like a straight line between me and this thing, and I don't know the how, and I'm not attached to the how, but I know that I'm going in this direction. And if I'm not at moments, because I'm human, right? Then I course correct. Either I change the direction in which I'm going if I want to become someone else than what I thought yesterday, or I just most regularly, what will happen is I'm realizing, actually, I'm not in the right direction. I need to shift a little bit, right? I need to go back in a direction of who I really want to be because I lost myself for a little bit. And being aligned to me also means being okay with that, being okay with the ebbs and flows, being okay with the obstacles, from life, being okay with me, going the wrong way and taking curves when I could just go a straight line, and knowing that this is part of life, right? And so that's what it means to me now. Perhaps it will mean something else to me in the future. But, when I think about life in this way and alignment is in this way, perhaps you can even see it, like hear it in my voice if you're listening to me, or see it in the video. But I feel so at peace, and there's also joy inside of me, right? I feel very alive in the life that I've chosen right now. And in this conception of life, this life feels good. This perception of life to me feels good. And I think that alignment, at least partly, is about feeling good as well. So, in any case, my friend, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it was useful. I hope it was interesting or insightful in some way. If you have anything that you want to tell me, please do write in the comments or write to me if you have my email address, or write to me on socials, like wherever you want to interact with me. But I would love to hear your thoughts on what alignment means to you and what it looks like in this phase of your life, and whether you've had different phases as well, right? Um, I love to hear it all. And I think that's it. Sending you tons of love. And I will see you next week on Wednesday for our next episode with a beautiful guest. See you, my friend. Bye.